Hi.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on.
I bet you're wondering where I am and who that guy is. Welcome back to episode 7 of Daffy's Roundtable. For this episode, we tried to do things a little different and actually recorded the episode in person at my guest's house. So you may hear us refer to certain things in person, like certain animals or certain books. For anyone listening on a podcasting app, don't worry, everything we discussed will be in the show notes. But if you can watch this episode, listen to it, I highly recommend it. Anyway, my guest today is my personal encyclopedia on all things leachies, and in this episode, he's going to walk us through leachie natural history, caring for leachies, as well as the breeding do's and don'ts of these beautiful lizards. So, without further ado, everybody, please help me welcome my good friend James Ellis, also known as I Am Nomad.
Okay. Mr. James, how are you?
Physically, emotionally exhausted. Yourself?
That's always the answer I get from you. I'm doing great.
It's been a long pandemic, my friend.
It has. I completely agree. Okay. Leachies.
Yep.
Leachies.
Leachies.
Leachies are out. Okay. Let us know, how did you get into leachies, or how did you get into reptiles, and then how did you get into leachies?
So I got into reptiles because my parents are allergic to animal dander.
Okay.
So I was limited to basically just reptiles and fish growing up.
Sweet.
Fish do basically nothing for me. So
I have to disagree with you on that, but go ahead.
For me, I can appreciate they're awesome.
Oh, they're beautiful.
I have no interest.
Fair.
So I started out having a single crested gecko when I was 5 or 6, rapidly turned into having a breeding colony of 3 within like a year.
So when you were like 6, 7?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. Long time ago.
And that was before like crested gecko diets were in the country, so it was just doing like home mixed like baby food diets with vitamins mixed in and
Pre-Rapashi, pre-Pangea, pre...
I mean, I'm pretty sure it existed in the States at the time, it just didn't exist in Canada.
Okay.
At least it wasn't like very easy to find. But it was mostly just that and crickets.
Sweet. Did you get the baby food pre-mixed, or did you mix it yourself?
We'd get the baby food pre-mixed and just like mix in calcium with like some basic vitamins in it, and that's the best we could do.
Very cool. Very cool.
Which still wasn't great. Definitely got some MBD in one of them.
Okay. But I mean, like, for what you had, you made it.
It was pretty okay. I mean, they did breed.
Oh yeah,
It was supposed to be a group of 3 females, but one of them turned out to be a male after the fact.
So you just got lucky and ended up breeding.
Yeah, it wasn't intentional.
No, okay. And did you sell the babies you produced?
We basically wound up giving them away because people didn't want to pay much for them. There wasn't a huge demand for crested geckos in Ottawa at the time.
Probably not even for any reptile at all.
No, I mean reptiles, sure, but not
crested geckos.
like we were getting between the 2 females, we got like
a lot of eggs.
a lot of babies in a season.
Yeah, probably
My
like
dad
around
tells me
24.
we got something like 40, but probably more than that. Do you remember the last thing we were talking about, Em?
Well, I know you were talking about how many
Oh yeah, right.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. Okay, so you bred crested geckos.
Yeah, when I
gave most
was
of
little,
them
I
away.
had
Yeah.
the 2 females of the male, and like my dad was saying something about getting like 30 babies in a season.
Yeah.
Just nuts.
Yeah, 100%.
And, like,
They get around like 12 to 14.
You'd get so
Roughly
many
each.
people going like, "Hey, I want it and the whole kit, $50." So it reached the point where we're just like, "Please take them."
Yeah. Okay. That's weird though, because I would have expected the less they were bred. So back then that there was more of a demand and they
This
were
is like
higher priced.
2003, 2004. They did.
Yeah. So maybe the prices started going up after that, or once the morphs were introduced.
Well, it's
I
more
don't
that
know.
like the morphs that were available in Ottawa were like super basic.
Yeah. So
Like
just
very very low.
the green and yellow harlequins, and pretty much that's it. Yeah.
And my first one was a Dalmatian, but he was like
cool.
very very low spots.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's awesome.
Yep.
Okay, and then from there, how did you get into leachies?
So from there, I wound up kind of losing interest in crested geckos and sold the colony when I was younger. Didn't have any pets for a good while.
Okay.
Wound up getting a corn snake. From the corn snake, wound up getting a ball python. From the ball python, I started working at CJ.
Is this the ball python that you got?
This is the ball python in question.
Very
I've had
cool.
them for 6 years now.
Okay, very cool.
Then while working at CJ, the reptile manager at the time, wound up visiting a breeder and picked up a adult Leachie. He was about 5 years old when he got him. That had been kept in like an 18-inch cube tank.
Okay.
And he was like a full-grown yate with a severe spinal twist.
Okay.
I mean, I can give you pictures to show later if you want to.
Yeah, we can upload. Yeah. Like he had like a little bit of a kink kind of.
Oh no, it was really bad. Like his spine was severely S-shaped in the middle. Like he had a visible hunch to him, and he was mean.
Okay.
I suspect it had a lot to do with the fact that he was in pain a lot of the time. So it's basically scoliosis, but for lizards.
Okay.
So I got him. I worked with him, hand taming him. There was a time and a place where if you go within 6 feet of the tank, he was like barking through the glass, trying to bite you.
Okay.
And actually, I think I actually have a video of that.
Okay. I actually do have a question about barking, so we'll get back to that once you're
Okay. So I got him. He managed to hand tame him out. He was wound up being an absolute sweetie pie, and then his health took a turn for the worse. Fought real hard to try and save him, and in the end, ended up having him euthanized because that was the only real option for him to go peacefully and not be in pain.
100%. I would have expected them to euthanize him like right out of the egg if he came out that bad.
Yeah, they usually do, but they didn't in his case. Again, I don't know what the rationale was. They just didn't.
Okay.
So got him hand tamed. He ended up being euthanized, and I very quickly filled the hole in my heart with another one.
Okay.
And then another one, and then next thing you know, I have 5 of them, and considering others.
Okay. How long ago was this?
About 2 years now.
Okay.
So I ended up getting Patches up here first.
Okay.
And then after Patches, I wound up getting one of my babies down on the bottom shelf. Then after that baby,
I'll insert clips at this time of him. Okay.
So I got a little baby Pebble, who's it's a northern gecko HSX line, which is a Super X cross, which we can get into later.
Yeah.
Then I got a male Grand Tear that I'm hoping to pair with Patches once he gets a little bit bigger. Who's this guy up here. And then the guy who produced the other one, the Pebble, the one that I got, wound up selling me the pair that produced them. And from that pair, the female wound up rejecting the male after I got them, so I swapped her for a different one, and they have been getting along swimmingly.
So they are paired up in there?
They are paired up in there. They're living together. They're really, really cute.
And why would she reject, if they were already paired up, why would she reject him once they move? Is that a change of territory thing? Or?
So I'm thinking it's because they were housed together with no cooldown period during the winters for the better part, well, for several years at least. So she never could really get too far away from him. When I got the pair, the male had the tip of his tail bitten off.
Wow.
Which is fully regenerated now. If you don't know what you're looking for, you don't even notice that it's gone. But she'd bitten off the tip of his tail, and she just got progressively more and more violent the longer I had them together, so I wound up trading her to a regular of mine through work, and this new female and the male are getting along great.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
So lots of Leachie projects coming.
I don't think I'm going to get eggs this season, because the season's basically over at this point. It's very possible she's carrying some, but I'm yet to see her lay. I think I've seen her dig around a little bit, so fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
But I haven't seen anything yet.
And how many clutches do you usually get a year?
I've usually like 1 to 4 from what I've heard, but I've heard as many as 10 clutches in a season.
Wow. Okay.
I think it was Muriel the Gecko on Instagram that her pair went up producing like 10 pairs last season, so that's like 20 babies.
But the average is around like 3-4 clutches?
Yep.
So compared to a crested gecko, that's almost nothing.
Yep. They're a
okay.
lot less prolific than cresties, and they are much more difficult to breed than
and
cresties.
so that's where their price comes in
That
as well.
is absolutely where their price comes from.
Okay, because they're a couple of $100 more expensive than a crested gecko.
Thousands more, depending where you're looking.
Right. And does the price increase and decrease depending on the size of the gecko? Is it pattern? Like, so for crested geckos, it's the morphs is what decides the price.
So the thing with leechies is they don't really have morphs yet. There are a few morphs that have been like really, really early morphs, like the Leapin' Leachies Darth Maul line. I would consider to be a morph because it's like he took a couple different locales, smashed them together, and line bred that until they very, very consistently were getting the exact same traits with every single baby. Just textbook morph.
And this Darth Maul line is like a redder.
It is a really, really dark green to almost black base with dark pink to like crimson red bars, like the character Darth Maul.
Very cool. Okay, very cool. Okay, so it's not the morph that decides
It's
the
so
price.
part of it is the size of the parents will help determine price. The locality of the parents, whether or not it's a mixed locality of the parents, because like pure lines are considered. When I say pure line, I mean it's just one locale, and they have line bred that locale in an ethical way, where
Okay.
every single different new piece of blood is like the pure line bloodline, but not
Elected specifically from that locale.
not incest.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Last thing we need is
Mutating geckos.
Yeah. So like a pure line's gonna be more expensive than like a mixed locale mutt. These two Grand Terrors up here cost me the better part of $2,000 and up each,
Wow.
but they are not pure lines.
Okay.
They are both Yate and Mount Kogus crosses.
Okay. Actually, let's take a step back. Let's get into that. So there's different locales
Yep.
in New Caledonia, and
Yep.
Depending on where the Leachie comes from, it's either larger size, small, or like how does
So
what
the
differentiates it?
insular islands that go around the mainland of New Caledonia, like everywhere around New Caledonia, basically everywhere in New Caledonia.
So they're found
has-
all over New Caledonia.
all over.
Beautiful.
The insular islands, there's not very much food available, so they are typically much smaller, but they generally have very, very pale bases with very, very bright bars on their
Okay.
sides, whereas the mainland giants
Which
are
is what you
typically
were referring to as Grand Terre.
Grand Terre, which is the main island.
Okay.
They are typically a lot bigger,
Right.
like you're at least a foot or more,
Right.
in the ballpark of like 300 to 400 grams.
And that puts them as considered the largest gecko species, correct?
Yes, so they are the largest extant species of gecko. There is an extinct species.
Extant
honest-
meaning still alive?
Yes, extant meaning still not extinct.
It's not extinct? Okay, yeah.
So the extinct species that is considered to be bigger, there's only one known specimen that was preserved. It's not actually entirely sure if it's a legitimate specimen, but I mean, they listed as such. It's called the Delcourt's giant gecko. It was the better part of like 2 feet long.
Wow.
It was collected at some point in the late 1700s, early 1800s, and it wound up in the basement of a museum, where it was rediscovered like a century later and recorded in the books.
But they haven't found any in the wild
They have
since.
never found any in the wild since.
Okay,
So,
very
I mean,
cool.
it could be hiding somewhere in New Zealand,
Yeah, yeah, you
but
never
they don't
know
for sure.
yeah.
They don't know for sure. Hopefully.
That's very
Cool.
cool. Okay. So extant, they are the largest.
They are the
gecko.
largest known species of gecko.
And then the ones from Grand Terre would be the largest of the
Of the
large.
largest,
Okay.
yeah.
Very cool.
So the Grand Terre are known to be a little bit more feisty than some of the insular island ones. I found through my personal experience that it doesn't matter.
The Grand Terre are found to be more feisty than the.
The insular island
Okay.
locales, but
Right.
I've found it's really just an individual base. I often treat them sort of like a large anxious dog. You need to
Okay.
respect their boundaries and you can
Right.
earn their trust, but if you're just going in there trying to grab them, you're probably going to get bit.
Fair.
I've been nabbed more times, well, almost nabbed more times by like a tiny Nuana, which is the smallest locale.
Nuana is the smallest locale.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Nuana, Nuami are the two most common localities of insular island Leachie. It's two sides of an atoll off the south side of Isle of Pines, which is at
Okay.
the south end of Grand Terre.
Which is where crested geckos are found. Okay.
Yep. I think it's like the south side of Grand Terre and Isle of Pines where you find most cresties,
Yeah.
if I remember right. The Nuana is the smallest one. The one I had was like maybe 9 inches, tip of the nose, tip of the tail.
Okay.
So small for
So very
Leachie.
small. Yeah.
Like patches up here is like 9 inches, tip of the nose to vent, not counting her tail at all.
Okay.
Um,
And she's gonna get bigger.
fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Okay.
They're considered like mature and ready to breed at about 3 years, but from what I've read, they're not really done growing. I mean, it's slower after 3 years, but they're not really done growing until like 5 to 7 years.
It's interesting. I've heard this with a lot of reptiles. Like even once they've hit their sexual maturity, they slowly keep growing, just at a
Yep.
like a lot slower pace.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So you're saying so Patches is a Grand Terre mixed with like one of the insular islands.
Yep, so she is a non-insular island. She's two different Grand Terre localities mixed together.
Okay.
So she is Yate, which is the heaviest locale of Leachie. They aren't the longest, but they are the beefiest.
Okay.
And Mount Kogus Troger line. There's two different lines of Mount Kogus. So there's the Troger line, which tends to be kind of from what I've seen, they tend to be a little bit darker with some pinstriping on their sides. And then there's the Friedel line, which is kind of similar. The ones that I've seen around tend to be a little bit less patterned, and I've seen that they can have like pinkish or reddish stripes on their sides. Given proper line breeding, it's usually kind of like a whitish with kind of pink spots with the closer to wild lines that I've seen. But
The wild lines are the ones that have more of the pink spots on them?
so the wild lines are the ones that are closest to the original wild caught specimens, which are still alive. Like the original collected wild caught specimens are still alive.
Do you know who they were collected by and when?
I don't know who they were collected by, but I believe it was the early 90s where a lot of them got pulled out of New Caledonia.
So before the crested geckos even?
I don't know when crested geckos were first collected.
I think it was 1996.
Okay, I mean it could have been all about the same time.
Okay.
Like, there was a lot of expeditions being done in New Caledonia all around the same date, but
Very cool. Very cool.
I haven't looked into it too much.
Cool.
But I can tell you that some of the original wild caught specimens, actually if you grab the life of giant geckos there, or it's the longer life of giant geckos. It's
This
not
one right
the
here?
other one.
This one.
Yep. So that pair on the front there, I believe, are a Mount Cogus pair that was originally field collected.
Okay.
There's a breeder that I follow. I think it's Leachie Garden on Instagram, but don't quote me on that. I'd have to look around. That actually wound up getting this exact pair.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, the name of the guy on the book, no, this is not the one. There's another, maybe this is him.
Philip Tremper?
What?
You think Philip Tremper?
Maybe.
So I'm pretty sure he has the. I could be mixing up the people I'm thinking of, but
I don't know, but that's a very cool book.
so you can't really find that edition of it anymore because it's out of print, has been for a while. But there is currently the second edition of this book, which is a little bit more updated, that has been made available. You can get it through Northern Gecko in Canada. It's about
Oh yeah, I've gone through their
60, 70
book, their
bucks.
books. They have some cool stuff actually.
Yeah. It's a fantastic book. You can't find a lot of the information out there in that book online.
Yeah, we might actually have to pull out another one or two of these books because there's some cool ones in there.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Sweet. Okay, so what about setup? So like, what's the average temperature you keep them at? How do you like heat the terrarium if you So the average temperature in New Caledonia is like 75, 77. What are you keeping your
goes
geckos
all
at?
the way down to like mid 60s during the winter. It doesn't really stay that low, like mid 60s to like 70.
It can go up to 80
and it goes up to like 84-ish
84,
during
yeah.
the summer.
Correct.
But it's like average keeping temperature, I'd say, is between like 75 and like mid 70s, low 80s
Okay.
is comfortable for them. So I'm in a cold basement. So I like to, like during the summer, it's plenty warm in here. I'm not worried about them. But during the winter, I will often have like the spots where they typically hide away at night, not at night, during the day, and have a heat pad on the glass that sits at like 85-ish, give or take.
Yeah.
And they seem to be pretty pleased with that during the winter.
But they have spots to escape to.
They have other spots to go.
Yeah.
I always have different tubes slipped around for them to hide behind.
Yeah, because if I put a heat pad at 85 next to my crested geckos, I'd cook one of them. They cannot handle that high of heat. I don't think
These
so.
guys absolutely can.
Okay.
I mean, they're living proof that they can.
Very cool. And then like hardscape wise, I'm seeing you're using a lot of cork, a lot of
That's-
plants. Why is that?
So the cork is an aesthetic choice. I like it. I like the trees I can build with it. You can use really any hardwood. I don't see why not.
Okay.
But as far as plants, I am very, very picky about the plants I use, not because I'm worried about the plants being dangerous, but because these are lizards the better part of a pound with claws the size of kitten claws that are just as sharp. So when they're climbing around at night, raising a ruckus,
Bouncing around on everything and
they will snap leaves off just by their sheer weight,
okay.
or they will shred them
Yeah.
just by climbing around on them.
Yeah.
So a lot of the plants that I have in here haven't made it long term.
I can see that one right there is already
that's
taking a
fern.
beating.
That bird's
yeah.
nest fern is not happy with me. I'm gonna have
Yeah.
to replace it soon. I mean, I have a replacement sitting here for it.
Okay. Very cool.
My favorite plant for them has got to be Ficus elastica burgundy. I really like the dark tones of it, and
Is that the one you have up there?
That's the one up there.
Very cool.
That's this one.
Cool. That yeah.
It is also known as the rubber plant. It is really, really, really solid, the leaves are generally pretty difficult to break. Like if it's in a high traffic area and they're constantly climbing on it, they will break the leaf, it will come off.
Okay.
But if it's in an area kind of like tucked back in here, or they're climbing over it or below it and not really touching it, the plant goes in, no issue.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And then maybe as well, like Zanzibaria, the snake plants, probably can tolerate their rate.
It can tolerate their damage fairly well. I don't, when I've had it in my tanks, it doesn't really seem to thrive and grow, but it survives.
It kind of, yeah, it just stays as, I find it the same. It grows very slowly, I think is what it is.
Like I have one back there that has not grown at all since I put it in
Yeah.
the better part of a year ago.
Okay. And is bioactive, I see all of yours are bioactive. Is bioactive completely necessary, or
No,
are they
you can keep these guys bare bottom with just bits of, I'm gonna say bits of cork because that's the easiest and most readily available.
Right.
You don't need to use cork again. You can use varying types of wood. What's nice about cork is you got those pre-ready rounds they like to hide in. They have the flats they can easily hide behind, so just having a whole bunch of that stacked up, they'll get in there, they'll get good and comfy. They don't need the substrate. Having a lay box if you're trying to breed is all you really need.
Okay.
These guys are my pets first. Like
Right.
the pair that I'm working with trying to breed,
Right.
they breed, that's awesome. If they don't breed, they're still my pets. And
100%.
I want my pets to be comfortable and happy first and foremost.
No, that's
So I spoil them rotten with these big cages. These are way above what's considered the minimum for these guys.
right. Like Patches is in what?
36, 18, 36, the largest Exoterra you can buy.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So for these guys, for an adult, the minimum is considered to be an 18, 18, 24 Exoterra, the small tall.
Yeah.
And that, you can keep them in that, happy and healthy their whole lives as an individual, but I prefer to spoil my animals.
And I'll have to include some clips of all your tanks because they're beautiful builds.
Please, by all means.
So so I see you use nails and you screw pieces of cork
Yep.
bark as branches. What
Yep.
is that to keep
so
them up, or?
it's generally considered safer to use zip ties. So you drill holes with the zip ties through, hold it in place like that. I am very careful about how I do the screwing like that. The big main tubes that they're attached to are filled with expanding foam, like Pond Safe's expanding foam.
So they can't even get
So
in there.
they can't get into the big main tubes. But the branches that are screwed in place, the screws are completely seated in. So nothing gets ripped out. They're never actually really exposed to the dangerous end of the screw at all.
Very cool.
And I generally try and cover them in silicone, but not all of them.
Very cool. For such a large gecko, once they're younger, I've seen you keep them in like, I don't know, phanariums, cricket keepers, like smaller enclosures. Why is that? Is that because they struggle to find food, or they just stress out easily?
No one's 100% certain exactly to the beginning of that thought. In the wild, through all the expeditions through New Caledonia, to my knowledge, they've only ever found 3 baby leachies,
Wow.
2 of which were dead.
Okay.
The third one was on its way out.
Wow. Do they know why?
Granted, they were like early dusk when they were looking around and finding those ones, or
Right.
like early dawn, so the light was starting to come out. They didn't really look around too much at night. But the suspicion is that these are animals that, when they're juveniles, they spend almost all their time undercover because, for one, their parents will eat them.
Yeah.
When they're that big, anything that thinks they'll try and eat
Gargoyle
them will
geckos
try.
can eat them that size.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they seem to do better from just a raising them aspect in a much smaller container.
Okay.
So for I raise them out when they're really, really young in like a 1 gallon critter keeper. Once they get up to about, I don't know, like that big or so, I move them up into like an 8, 8, 12 little cube.
Cool.
And I keep them in there for like 8 months to a year until they really, really pack on the size. They look almost too big for the enclosure. Once they're at that point, I move them up into a 12, 12, 18. And again, let them establish until they look almost too big to be in there. Then from there, I move them up into their adult-sized tank, and I have found through experimentation that they seem to get a lot bigger when you do it that way. Because they're able to eat more, they're less stressed, they can better use all the nutrients they're given.
That's very interesting. The person I bought my carpet python off of, the breeder, told me to do the same thing with my carpet python because apparently when you go too large, they stop eating. And I did upgrade him, and he stopped eating, and I had to re-downgrade him, and now he's eating fine again. So that's very interesting that that leachies do the same thing.
Yep.
Okay. And then like on that same note, handling wise, Do you start handling them when they're in that 1 gallon critter keeper at a young age?
Assuming it's eating well and it doesn't wind up throwing it off feed, doing short handling sessions when they're that small can be okay. I've found that when you're handling them fairly often when they're young to get them used to the fact that you're not a threat, they tend to be less aggressive as adults, but it's definitely not a surefire thing at all. They can be just as hostile the second, they can go from being an absolute sweetie pie to being a nightmare the second they hit puberty and the switch flips in their head.
Oh yeah?
Like
so even if you've gone through all the, not, I don't want to say training, but all the calming down, the conditioning,
calming down,
yeah.
they can just, a switch flips and all of a sudden like, yep, nope, this is my territory, I don't want you in it.
Okay. So that's where they get that reputation of being such an aggressive...
But again, I found that if you treat them like a large aggressive dog,
yeah,
you respect their boundaries and you slowly work with them to begin to trust you. I found that I've been able to get them to at least not immediately try and bite me.
100%. Yeah, because I've seen you handle all of your leechies, and not a single one of them. And I've had patches and a few of them at my house as well, and they never even tried to bite me. So
she's kind of an anomaly. She's very, very, very docile and gentle. This little guy up here is actually the first leechie to have landed a bite on me.
How bad was the bite?
Honestly, it wasn't bad.
No?
When he got me, it was just like barely even touched me. But and I assumed that he didn't get me. It was just a near thing until I took my hand out of the tank with his food bowl and there was blood coming down my arm.
So their teeth are sharp then?
Very sharp.
Okay.
So he just nicked the surface and it just bled a lot.
Okay. So you need to do a lot of, so not a beginner reptile then. You need to do a lot of working with them to be able to, oh, misking's going on. I hope the camera's catching that. Actually, that brings up, so I've heard from a lot of different people that leechies don't like to be wet. Is this true?
It's yes and no. It's not that they don't like to be wet, it's that they can't stay wet.
Why can't they stay wet?
And it's not that the surface of their skin can't stay wet. The environment they're in, the surfaces cannot stay moist. If it stays moist for too long, they can lead to fatal skin infections. After talking with, I spoke with Mark from Northern Gecko about it, and typically he says it presents as the toe pads starting to turn kind of pink is an indication of the beginning of the onset of the infection. But if ignored, it is almost 100% fatal.
Okay.
Which is why you don't mess around with it. So having like short missing sessions, or even if you have long missing sessions, so long as everything dries out between.
So they do need a dry period.
They need the dry out period.
So what do you usually keep the humidity at, and then like how long does it drop for, and then like?
I'm a little bit less concerned with how quickly it drops and more that it stays consistently about like 60% humidity, fairly similar to a crested gecko.
Throughout the entire day?
For the entire day, but it can have periods where it goes up to like 85 and then over like an hour it just drops back down.
Okay, so pretty much exactly like a crested gecko. Awesome. And then, so that covers humidity, temperature, and their setup.
Yep.
How about food? What do you mostly feed?
So I'm
you have a brand that
basically
you're...
just feeding. You know.
I knew, yeah.
I'm basically just feeding Rapashi. I am a huge Rapashi stan. I primarily use a mixture of Pineapple Express and Grubs and Fruit.
I still have that in a little deli cup mixed together with Nomad's mix written on the outside.
We call it Band-Aid brand now.
Band-Aid brand?
Yeah,
oh, right.
After James Leachie.
Right.
So it's 2 parts Pineapple Express to 1 part Grubs and Fruit. They found the sweetness of the Pineapple Express they really, really like, but the additional excess protein in the Grubs and Fruit can really help with their growth.
Okay.
And that's actually, Jen has wound up using that mix for all of her new cow growouts, not just her leachies, everything, because she's found that has worked really, really well for getting that excess protein to really pack on size as they're growing.
I actually also use that exact same mix. It's the best two. I use mulberry occasionally, but those are my favorite too as well. And then how often do you do? How is it?
Every other day.
Every other day.
Crusty.
Okay.
So 2 of mine here, Bandit and the female from this pair, Maggie. They will take bugs for me. The rest of them have staunchly refused. They've had no interest.
Yeah.
But they'll take silkworms almost every day given the opportunity, and both of them now have taken frozen thaw mice pinkies.
Okay, I was gonna. So I saw this the other day.
Yeah, I think you have the footage.
I do, and I will definitely insert it in here. But who was it that took the...
That was Maggie. She's like surprisingly shy. It's the female in there. but she
She eats
is
well.
very food aggressive for anything I hand her on tongs.
Okay. And you feed them when you feed them insects. Is it live insects or are you feeding the like?
So I do the live silkworms for them. I
Okay.
haven't tried dead insects yet. Not to say it won't work. I just haven't tried it.
Silkworms.
But the silkworms I've really gone for, and the frozen thaw mice pinkies I seem to be really enthusiastic about. Especially for a female that may be carrying eggs, the extra calcium in the silkworms, the extra calcium in the mouse pinky are probably really good for her.
Do you dust the pinky and the silkworms, or do you just feed them as is?
The pinky I haven't dusted because it's just
Impossible.
it's like once a month.
Okay, yeah.
I don't feed them very often, even if it's like once a month. It's probably closer to like every 2.
Okay,
It's
cool.
just as like a treat here and there. And then the silks, I probably should, but I'm not really giving them often enough to worry about it.
Okay.
Especially considering the Rapashi is already full of vitamins and minerals when it's
100%.
pre-dosed.
Yeah.
In a perfect world, I probably should be.
Awesome. And then another treat that I've seen you give them at some point is bananas. Is there anything else?
So bananas I've done raw honey full of bee pollen.
Okay.
So bee pollen I've read can be really, really decent for
I
them.
just picked up a little jar of beef pollen.
But it's just like but I'll do like a little bit of a spoonful, let them lick some of it, and then that's it. And then as far as the banana, I let them take a couple bites and then call it quits.
Awesome. And is
Make
that
sure
because the
not too
banana has a lot of sugar?
Yeah.
Or?
Don't want them to get fat.
Yeah, 100%. And okay, so if they do get fat, are they one of those lizards that it's really hard to get them to lose the weight and they just pack on? They
that's
stay?
every lizard.
It's
It's
just,
a huge pain to get weight off reptiles, so I just
Okay.
don't want to risk it.
100%. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
There's no way I'm paying for lipo for these guys.
4? Oh, I mean,
No,
wow.
no, I'm way too poor for that.
Okay, so we discussed morphs already.
Yep.
And we discussed the Darth Maul. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, Darth Maul.
morph. Okay.
Yep.
But there is a morph that I saw online that I didn't ask you about that I found really cool. Is it true that they have the axanthic Leachie, or is it melanistic Leachie?
So melanistic leachies, absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
Just leachies high in melanin. He is actually a melanistic leachie.
Okay.
So she is a Yate Mount Kogus cross.
Okay.
He is a Yate dark morph Mount Kogus cross.
Okay.
So I'd be very interested to see what kind of babies they produce.
Yeah,
'cause I'm
100%.
very curious to see if they get any dark morph babies. It is exactly what this sounds like. They just come out like either like a really, really dark green or like really dark brown as babies.
Almost
As
like
they
black, right?
as they mature, they actually end up going through like what's known as a gray phase, which is exactly what he's going through right
Yeah,
now. He
yeah.
looks kind of gray. But as they start to reach adulthood, they go back. Their color comes back with a fury. They get really, really dark.
Cool.
Which is what I'm hoping for.
And is anybody working with this? Like,
Oh yeah, there's all kinds of people that are working with it.
Prove it out.
Pretty sure Leachie Garden again is doing it. Ridiculous Rex. What's another one there? It's on the tip of my tongue.
That's the yeah.
Rack City, I think they're called.
That's a good name.
Yeah, it is.
Awesome. Okay, we brought this up at the beginning, but I wanted to touch on it more. What about barking and like chirping? I've heard they vocalize.
They
a lot.
are one of the more vocal gecko species out there.
Okay.
They bark, they chirp, they whistle, they squeak, they squawk, they make almost like a kind of gurgling, chittering bark sound. It's horrifying to wake up to. You feel like there's a goblin in the room.
When I had patches over, I would hear her do these little like bark sounds. Yeah.
And I found that mostly it's kind of just like a chuffing sound, sort of like a dog or like a whistle.
Okay, and why do they like? What's the purpose of?
They can be like calling to others, just vocalizing distress or that they're annoyed.
So it's not really like a get out of here warning.
Oh, it can be.
It can be.
It absolutely can be.
Okay.
Like you can know from the sound, but also their body language when they want you gone.
Okay.
Like they will push themselves up. They will puff their neck out as big as it gets.
Huh.
So with their mouth open, they'll start doing that kind of like chittering, gurgling bark at you.
Very cool.
You'll know.
You'll know, yeah. Okay, cool. What about when like during breeding, like crested geckos will make this like, I don't know how to describe it. It kind of sounds like you're unzipping a bag sound while they're locking up. Do you know if leachies do the same thing?
I wouldn't be surprised if they made noise, but I've never sat down and observed it.
Okay.
I have a night vision camera that keeps an eye on my pair at night, so I can go and review footage,
Right.
make sure they're still getting along, and they have been. But does not pick up the audio from inside the tank too well, so I don't really hear anything.
Okay, cool.
I can tell you sitting on the couch at like 2 a.m., they tend to be pretty vocal with
You
each
hear
other,
it,
but it's
yeah.
not necessarily them. It could be them just calling to each other, being friendly. It could be the male or the female telling the other one to back off because they're annoyed. They're not in the mood to play.
Picking on each other.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, that's a good segue into breeding. So we don't know if they vocalize, but do you?
I suspect they probably do, but it's not like a one singular dedicated noise. They have a pretty wide vocal range.
Okay.
I mean, if they're upset, they're probably just gonna squawk at the other.
Yeah, that like humans.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, when you do want to breed them, how do you start the initial introduction? Do you have to?
So first and foremost, you gotta get 2 of them, which is
That's usually how it works.
huge expense.
Yeah.
So getting
And a really big
it's either
cage.
an investment in time or an investment. I don't know. You can do it in 1824. Most of the
You can
breeds
do
I
it in
know do
18.
it in
Yeah.
something that's
Oh, okay.
small.
Very cool.
You can either invest your time or you can invest your money. I mean, you're going to be investing money either way, but you can either invest a lot of your money or you can invest a lot of your time. If you're getting a sexed pair of mature geckos,
You're not investing.
you're
your time.
looking at a minimum like 1,500 each.
Wow. Each. Each.
For getting an unsexed baby, you can get them as cheap as like I've seen like 400 bucks at the
yeah.
lowest.
Yeah.
You're getting 2 of them, and then it's 3 years until you can breed them, assuming it's a male-female.
Yeah.
Which isn't guaranteed.
It's not
if you're
guaranteed.
getting unsexed.
Yeah. So they get to sexual maturity around three
Thereabouts,
years.
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it depends on who you ask. Some people will say that the Grand Terres it's closer to 5 years, but from the reading I've done, it's generally about 3 years they're good to go.
Okay.
I mean, with the females, once they lay their first duds.
Okay. Do you wait for? And is this a common thing that they'll lay duds?
So the females will lay duds once they've hit sexual maturity.
Okay.
They'll start producing their duds.
How possible is it that any of these duds are viable
So
without
they
them?
absolutely produce parthenogenic babies.
Yeah.
The survival rate is fairly low of the
Okay.
babies, and there has never been a second generation parthenogenic baby.
And do the babies that come out usually come out female?
Their sex is incubator based.
Their sex is incubator based.
Yep.
So they
So
are
it's
temperature
temperature-based.
dependent. Okay.
They're
Okay.
temperature dependent for their sex.
So what is it like? The warmer, the more likely it's a male.
Yeah, I think it's. Oh, I was reading this the other day. So you incubate at a slightly higher temperature for the first 3 or 4 weeks, and then you reduce down to like 78. So like 78 is considered like just the average incubation temperature, but if you do it cooler or hotter at the beginning, I believe that's what determines the sex. And then the rest of the incubation is just done at like a standard temperature.
Okay, so 78 is the average temperature. So you don't actually need an incubator or anything. You can
If you've got
technically
a warm enough room,
you can
just do
technically
that.
incubate. Okay.
I live in a basement where the roommates upstairs have control of the thermostat for the whole house, so
Right.
I bought an incubator
You bought it, yeah.
because I'm not willing to mess around with that.
Yeah.
It's a time where I woke up here at like 3 a.m. because the entire apartment was like 52 Fahrenheit.
Okay.
It was hell. It was awful.
Were they okay?
I was cold. They were probably miserable.
Yeah.
But yeah, since then, thermostat for them, and I have heat emitters on as many tanks as I can.
Okay. Heat emitters.
Yep.
What is that?
Just a low power. It's like a. I'm gonna call it a bulb because I can't think of a better word, but it's sort of like a bulb that you put into a light socket that's sort of like a stove element. It just
Okay.
outputs heat but no light.
And you have this turned on all the time?
Yep.
Okay.
So I have really, really low watt ones that just bring up the ambient temperature ever so slightly.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And then you do so that's in addition to the heat pads on the side of the tank.
Yep. During the winter I have the heat pads on, during the summer I have the heat pads off.
Okay. Okay. And then once you do eventually get eggs, do you plan on incubating them at 78? Or?
I'm just going to incubate them at 78. I'm
Yeah,
not
you're
going to mess
gonna
around trying to
okay.
find male or female because I don't really care.
Yeah, and then like whatever it comes. So it could be
Whatever
random
comes
at
out,
that.
comes out. Yep. So these guys are going to be. I think the term for them is a Super X cross. So the one male is Northern Gecko HSX3 breeding group, which is the 3rd generation line of a Super X line. Super X line being a proven out morph where, not quite a morph. Each of the 4 grandparents of each gecko in the pairing. So each parent. Okay, so for the baby, all 4 grandparents
Okay.
are a unique locality. So the grandparents are one locality. The parents are each
Each
2
baby.
mixed localities.
Right.
The baby has 4 localities in it. So
Right.
it's a Super X.
Huh.
How
long did it take you to learn all these locales and morphs and?
A while. I'm a nerd. I have no life.
Yeah.
That's what I do. I just read because it's neat. They're fascinating. You're talking about an animal where the original wild specimens, most of them are still alive and kicking.
Yeah.
These are animals that they average about 30 years, but I've read
Wow.
of like specimens ballpark to be about 60 years old.
Wow, 60 years old.
I think the
Wow.
oldest one I've read about was like 57.
In captivity.
Yep. Granted, that's not confirmed.
Okay.
That's just what I was reading off of the forum.
Right.
But old.
And then if those were taken out of the wild, God knows how old they were when they were picked up.
From what I've read, the old ones typically make it to be about a decade or decade and a half
Once they're
before
picked.
they kick it.
Okay.
But they live a lot longer in captivity in ideal conditions.
That's very, very cool. And is there a book you can, like, are we going back to this library? Is there a book you recommend?
Yeah,
people
The
to-
Life of Giant Geckos is the
Is the
best
same
book
one?
I've found.
Okay.
There's like the original book on Rex by, I think it's just called like Rhacodactylus,
Okay.
which is written by the same people. I think it's
Alan Rapace and
Alan
Philip,
Rapace and
That is the one, I
Frank
think.
Fast.
Yeah.
I know that I know someone who has a copy of them, but you can't really get that one anymore. It's like $900 on eBay now.
Fun.
That covers all of the rack species, including Cresties, because once upon a time they're considered to be a rack species.
Right,
They're
now they switched over to
Crothiciliatus.
purples. Yeah.
But that book there, The Life of Giant Gecko, specializes primarily on leachies. It has a lot of information on it that you could technically find online through the forums, but it's going to be...
It's all in one
It's
page,
all in
yeah.
one spot.
Yeah.
You don't have to dig for it for months at a time.
100%. And just like a side note, I see the Mushroom Hunters Field Guide, and we got to go out next spring and mushroom hunt. That's a lot of fun.
Alexa, no one asked you.
She maybe wants to go mushroom hunting too. You never know.
I happened across that at a thrift store, and I thought it was neat.
That's really cool. I
Yeah.
I don't know anything about mushrooms, but
Neither do I.
the idea is very interesting to
I
me.
thought it fit on the shelf pretty well.
It definitely does. Definitely does. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
So you either invest a little bit of your money in time, or you invest a lot of your money and not as much time to get a sex adult pair. Once you have that together, you take the female inside of her tank. You take the male, you have him like a critter keeper or something, and you put the critter keeper in the tank overnight, so they can see each other, get close to each other, but they can't kill each other. And you either stay in the room and pay attention to how they're doing, which is the more old school method, and see if they're hanging out really close together. Or you do what I do and you put a night vision camera on it with motion tracking, and you just check the footage in the morning and see what they did. If they're staying really close together and hanging out, it's a good sign. They're really gonna get along.
So in crested geckos, you can get like a male and like 3-4 females and like pair them up to all. You can't do this.
You cannot. They're very preferential about their mates. They're surprisingly intelligent.
So once they pair, they're bonded for the season or for life.
Depends who you ask.
Okay.
Generally, like I've read that some people say that they bond for life. Others they bond for a long time. I've read that you can have like a male and female that have remained bonded for like 10 years, and all of a sudden just switch flips. They're trying to kill each other.
Right, like the ones you said you got, like...
Yeah, so they've been together like, I think like 6 years or
And
so. And then
change of territory, change
of territory. I made the mistake of separating them to quarantine them, which is probably the nail in the coffin, but it seemed like the female was getting pretty done with him.
Okay. Very cool. Okay, so you gotta slowly introduce them then.
Yep, so you have like the male in the little critter keeper, the female on the outside. You watch like your footage.
And you do this several nights in a row?
I do it several nights in a row.
Okay.
So the male will be on the inside of the cage, the female outside of the critter keeper, and you pay attention to what they're doing. If they're all both sleeping really, really close together, it's a good sign they're interested in each other.
Cool.
If he's staying as far away from her in the corner as he can, and she is staying as far away from him as they can,
Yeah.
don't even bother.
Okay.
They're not interested.
Now, do you put the male in the critter keeper or the female?
The male.
You want them to be in the female's territory when they're
Yes.
breeding? Okay.
Females are typically the aggressors, but from what I've read, it's best to introduce the male into the female's territory and let them get used to each other, but it's very, very important to have a male that is equal to or larger than the female in size.
Equal to or larger?
Yeah, that way the female will have a much harder time overpowering him because they're typically the aggressor when they are figuring out the dominance in their pair.
And have you ever considered doing it in a mutually, like just a tank that's new to both of them? Or
I've
would
read
that
you
not make
can.
it?
I haven't.
Okay. You don't think it'll make much of a difference?
It probably would because
Okay.
they're very scent dependent, but
They're scent dependent.
they have a very, very good sense of smell, like most other reptiles. Their
Okay.
eyesight's pretty good at night.
But do they also scent and leave scents to,
Yep.
like on a
So
marked territory?
you'll see them climbing around on the glass with their butt lips exposed.
Okay.
They seem to. It's almost like they fold open the lips of their cloaca. It looks like human lips.
Human
It's
lips.
gross.
Okay.
But they'll kind of rub it on a surface and
And like mark that as marked territory.
scent mark that. So they'll scent mark the whole area
Very interesting.
like that. So in my experience, I've done the male into the female's territory. I've read you can do it reversed.
Reverse.
I just did it that way because that seemed to work best for me. Just because the female was really, really anxious at the time and I wanted to get her settled in because she was newer.
No, right. I've heard the same thing with grass. People do male and female enclosure or female and male enclosure. People pair outside. So I don't know if it makes that much of a difference. But
It probably does, depending on the gecko.
okay.
So in my pair, that's how I did it. I did the male into the female's territory. And like the first night on the camera, like he just kind of sat right in the middle of his critter keeper sulking, but like she came over, they checked each other out through the glass, she moved on with her patrol, and then she'd come back and just sit
Keep
beside
checking
him
on
for a
him.
little bit, and they'd stare at each other through the glass, their noses almost touching, and she'd move on, and she just kept coming back and like hanging out with him for like 20 minutes, and then
And how long?
Put on.
Like you said, you do this several nights.
so
How
I
long
did
do
that
you-
for about 3 nights, and it looked really good every single night. They seemed to show the same amount of interest every single time, and then I did a supervised introduction where I stayed up until like 4 a.m. just
watching them.
hanging out.
What about introducing them during the day when they're like half asleep anyway?
I wouldn't, because if one of them gets really angry and awake and the other one's asleep, they don't stand a chance.
Okay. Okay, so they
Whereas
have to be like, okay, yeah.
when it's nighttime and they're both wide awake and they can defend or accept each other, no issues. That's how I did it, and they're getting along great. I've observed them showing behavior of locking. It seems
Okay.
like the male's at least trying. I don't, like the camera's not clear enough to know for sure if he actually
And now
succeeded in breeding her.
do they spend like time together now that they're in the same enclosure? Do they sleep
yeah,
next
they
to each
do.
other?
Yeah,
Do
they do. Actually, let me pull them out. Because
Yeah.
they sleep with their noses touching. They're really cute.
Oh, that actually is adorable.
Yeah, it's really, really cute. So the big one, the one with the wide head right here is Ricardo, and the one on this side is Maggie. If you look on the side of Maggie's head, there's some spots there that kind of look kind of like whitish, like white tinged stripes. Those are like breeding bruises where he's gripped the side of her head while he's trying to lock up with her. But they sleep like this every night with their noses touching or sleeping with their heads side by side. They're absolute little sweetie pies. Ricardo here is a very, very gentle boy. Maggie she can be mean. She doesn't like me too much, but Ricardo's a big meatball. He's a sweetie pie. And I'd previously mentioned that his tail is regenerated. You can see the split line right about there where,
Go a little to the left.
see the split line right about there where his tail had been bitten off, but it's grown back with some of the pattern and the color's the exact same. You didn't like that too much, buddy, huh?
Very cool.
Yeah. They're cuties.
Very cool.
All right. There you are. There you are.
Mr. Patches joins, or Mrs.
Ms.
Patches.
Patches?
Miss Patches.
She's married yet.
Okay, Miss Patches joins the interview.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay,
Good girl.
what happened?
Her claw just went inside of my hand.
So their claws are sharp.
Oh, they're sharp. Yep, they're like, I compare them to kitten claws because it's a very apt description. They're about the same size and they're just as sharp.
What?
Yep, they're sharp.
Oh yeah, I see that. Wow. So their teeth are sharp and their claws are sharp.
Yeah.
And you said breeding bruises on Maggie. So
Yep.
they must be.
They're kind of mean. Let's see if she talks at all.
Oh, I heard a huff.
You heard a huff?
I heard a huff.
Hope the camera heard a huff. She's generally pretty quiet.
So yeah, so you said breeding bruises on Maggie.
Yep.
Is that how bad does it get? And like when so I've seen pictures of like leechies with
It
like
can be cuts.
cuts and
She's
bloods
whistling.
and yeah.
It can be super, super nasty. In an ideal situation, which that is, they just get some bruises on the side of their head, which present as like the scales there are looking kind of milky.
Okay.
And once they're done, they just it heals up. They're fine. She produces eggs. Everything's hunky dory. In a worst case scenario, you get gashes and cuts, you get chunks taken out, you get limbs ripped off, you get tails bitten off.
And now this happens in the introduction period or in the actual like locking up?
Yes.
Yes to both.
Yes to both.
Okay.
Depends on how diligent you're being.
Sure.
So I've heard about a female Leachie that, on 2 occasions now actually, had her bottom jaw ripped off by a male,
Wow.
like hanging on by a couple tendons.
Wow.
The brooder got her jaw basically wired shut by a vet, and the jaw reattached in both instances. These guys are remarkable healers.
Yeah,
These
they
are kept in ideal conditions. They tend to heal up really, really well.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So resilient little animals.
They
I
really
mean,
are.
most reptiles are, but these guys seem like they're kind of bulletproof.
Generally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, why are they not considered like beginner pet reptiles then?
So, if you ask me, they absolutely are, so long as you've been coached really well.
Okay.
So, like my coworker Avery, for example, I talked her into getting her first reptile, which was a juvenile Leachie, a child of Ricardo's, actually.
Was that her first reptile?
That was her first reptile
very
of her own.
Okay.
Like she'd helped her sister raise her ball python,
Okay.
but there's like Toast was the first reptile that she got herself and raised herself.
Okay.
Their basic care and like conditions are very similar to a crested gecko, and so long as you are prepared to deal with their behavior, I'd say they're totally manageable.
Okay.
They're real cute little guys, and like if you're prepared and ready to deal with the attitude you can get from them, you come into it with the right mentality for taming them out, they can be excellent. Like, when I first got her, I very diligently, and Emily can attest to this, every single feeding session, I would find her in the tank, and I would hold the bowl for her and let her
Just
lick
let
it
her
clean.
I remember this actually, yeah.
And that consistent reinforcement during her formative years has built a bond. She trusts me.
So you could sit on the couch, watch TV, and she'd just sit in your lap. Like, no
Oh, she wouldn't sit in my lap. She'd
No.
crawl around like any gecko does.
Okay, yeah.
And considering she can do walls, no issue. I generally don't.
Yeah.
Um,
On top of
I
you.
mean, I've had her like sitting on my shoulder in the kitchen while I've been like doing prep work for cooking, and
Okay.
she's just gone from one shoulder to another, around on my back,
Right.
around on my chest, and it's whatever. But now that she's gotten a little more mature and I don't handle her as much, and I haven't been doing as much of the hand feeding, she's gotten a little bit more annoyed with me when I invade her
Plus the
territory.
puberty phase you talked about.
Yep. Yes, but I think it's more that I just don't. I don't handle her as much as I had because I've just been really, really busy with work. I don't do the hand feeding nearly as often or as long as I used to. So the bond has definitely degraded a little bit, but it is still there. She knows who I am. She trusts me. She doesn't get as nervous with me as she does with others.
You think they recognize individuals?
Oh,
like she can recognize?
absolutely knows who I am.
Awesome.
She knows who I am. She recognizes Emily. She doesn't necessarily trust Emily as well as she trusts me. Sorry, Em. But like she recognizes Em as a caregiver because there's been several instances where Em has been the one who's wound up feeding her because I've been away for some reason.
Right.
So she's really comfortable with me. She's fairly comfortable with Emily. Other people have had over, like I'll take her out, I'll hand them over, and she will turn right around
Right,
and
go
hop back over to me.
So that's crazy. So they do have the tendency to recognize people, or not tendency, but they have the ability to recognize people.
Yep. I mean, reptiles are generally a lot smarter than people give them credit for.
Facts. Very, very true. Awesome. Okay, I think we covered all the questions I have. So, Mr. James, thank you very much for doing this with
A
me.
pleasure. This was
I
fun.
appreciate you coming on. Can you let everybody know where they can find you on Instagram?
So you can find me on Instagram at the tag I am nomad. That's I_am_nomad_.
And I will put that in the
Yep.
show notes.
That was at one point my personal Instagram account. It is now primarily just my lizards. And it's fun to talk. I love sharing with people about this. It is my job. I talk with people about lizards all day, and I often find myself talking about these guys because they are
After work as well.
fascinating creatures. They get a really bad rap for being nasty animals, but they are very intelligent, and if respected and kept properly, they're
Beautiful.
partners.
No, 100%. No, thank you for sharing all your knowledge on... I came to you to speak about Leachies for a reason, right? The Leachie King himself.
Okay, I'll take it.
Yeah, no, 100%. Awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. And I don't know if I'm going to cut that here or just
Yeah,
back
sure,
to
whatever.
myself.
Let's get our drink on.
That sounds good.
Thank you all so much for tuning in to episode 7 of Daffy's Roundtable. Make sure you give James a follow on all his social medias. Also, if you're enjoying hearing these episodes, I would greatly appreciate subscribe on whatever podcasting platform you're using. And if it's Apple Podcasts, then make sure you leave us a review as well. You can find me on all social medias as Daffy's Reptiles. Make sure you give me a follow. And thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week.